that's where you should focus on. Look somewhere discussion, but before we do that, I'd like to welcome Kamara, who is going to do our land acknowledgement.
Thank you, Tony. My name is Kamara, and I am affiliated Blackfeet Northern Arapaho in a Southwest tribe. I'm standing here on behalf of our coastal and Coast Salish peoples of the Puget Sound. I am speaking on behalf of our elders, Jeffrey Thomas, enrolled Muckleshoot elder, and John Halliday, enrolled Muckleshoot elder. So with this, we would like to acknowledge our Coast Salish peoples of the central area, which is Seattle, which are the Chief Cheshiahud villages and the other Duwamish peoples that were here before the white people came. We acknowledge the ancestors. And as we travel to the direction of the north, we honor our ancestral peoples of the Tulalip, the Swinomish, the Stillaguamish, the Lummi, the Snohomish. To the east, Snohomish, Snoqualmie, Yakima, and all those relations. To the south, Muckleshoot, all of the affiliated groups from there. The ancestors of the Puyallups. And across the waters, we acknowledge our ancestors of Suquamish, Port Gamble, Sklallam, and all of those relations. And as we honor the lands we're standing on, as we call upon our ancestors on this day, acknowledging the earth that is acknowledged every day of every year by all of our tribal peoples, we give honor, respect, and deference as we feel and look at our peoples who in present day represent the ancestors and carry the blood. And we honor the waters, we honor the land, we honor the trees, the forests, and all of the relations, all the living relations. And as we do this, as each and every person who is present in this space and present in listening to this into future, may you take a moment in honor and respect and acknowledgement of all of these relations. So with this, we give thanks. We give thanks to our grandfathers, thanks to the ancestors, thanks to everyone. And with that, we hold our hands up. Thank you.
Thank you. We're going to get started here. Well, again, I'd like to welcome everyone to Rainier Avenue Radio, live from the historic Columbia City Theater in the heart of the South Seattle community, Columbia City. To Earth Deserves More Than a Day. Earth Day is today, and we will be hosting 5 days of panel discussions, lectures, films, interviews, and a whole lot more, creating awareness to environmental justice. The Earth that we live on is facing a number of different issues, you might even say crises. From global warming to melting ice caps causing sea levels to rise, and plastic pollution. But there are also what I'll call industrial polluters, accountable for damage done to communities of color, indigenous, and low-income communities. Creating awareness to these issues is an important step forward. For too long, these communities have suffered disproportionately from pollution and climate change, and that suffering is often fatal. Minority communities bear a disproportionate burden of environmental pollution. Now, there is also social injustice in environment protection. Environmental organizations, government, non-government, private sector are all overwhelmingly staffed by upper middle class whites. We'll be talking about race as well. And so I know that makes some folks uncomfortable. You may be saying to yourself, environmental justice, what does that have to do with race? Well, it has to do with everything. We're excited to partner with King County Parks over the next 5 days to bring you Earth Deserves More Than a Day. You'll hear from a number of individuals and organizations, professionals, academics, community members who are vested in environmental justice and how you are impacted, your quality of life, how it is impacted. So let's get started with a message from our King County Executive, Dow Constantine.
I'm King County Executive Dow Constantine. Thank you for joining us for Earth Deserves More Than a Day. We're thrilled to partner with Rainier Avenue Radio for week-long programming discussing environmental justice and highlighting the work King County is doing in our commitment to protect and preserve our shared natural environment for generations to come. That includes restoring salmon habitat, improving our region's water quality, creating equitable access to parks and the outdoors, and more. In collaboration with community partners, including Rainier Avenue Radio, King County uplifts the deep knowledge and voices of frontline communities and communities of color as we center environmental justice in our work. This week is an opportunity to inspire hope for the future by demonstrating what we can achieve when we partner with community and mobilize resources to accomplish a shared vision. You can also learn more tips to go green and Earth Week events by visiting kingcounty.gov/Earth Day. We hope you tune in to Rainier Avenue Radio throughout the week to hear from King County staff and community as part of Earth Deserves More Than a Day. Let the successes we highlight inspire us to achieve even more.
Thank you, King County Executive Dow Constantine. What is environmental justice? We have a panel here that is going to share their perspectives on this to you. I'm very quickly going to just introduce everybody. Then I'm going to introduce them and give them the opportunity to talk about themselves, what they do, and a really brief answer to environmental justice. We're going to dig a lot deeper into that. So this is just a really quick introduction right now. I'd like to welcome again on our panel from Windz Chains, Kamara. Also from King County Parks, Andrea Godinez. From Braided Seeds, Ashleigh Shoecraft. And from NH Consulting, Nancy Huizar. So I'm going to get started, Kim, with you. Tell us about your organization. And I know I'm making everybody go through this really quickly the first time. And environmental justice. What is environmental justice?
Welcome, everyone. My name is Kim Kamara. I am affiliated Blackfeet, Northern Arapaho, and possibly others. I am director of Windz Change Alliance. We are an organization based in Seattle, and we work with the over 365 tribal representatives in the greater urban Seattle I-5 corridor. Our mission is strengthening our people's presence, place, sacred spaces, and voice within our lands and everything around that. Cultural arts is a strong part because it's representative of who we are and how we walk in the world as tribal people. So our work, we are now really proactively, thanks to King County, we have a project based in Seattle to now elevate presence and voice of our tribal peoples located here and around the area. We also have another one at Camp Long this year that is to connect people, connect people with indigenous trees located in that park. Amazing. Old growth trees, beaver, coyote, and a lot of other relations that we hold sacred. In this work, we walk in good ways that have everything to do with our earth, have everything to do with access, environmental equity, justice, and following what has happened to all of our peoples with the colonial framework of annihilate or make invisible our peoples. So we are honored to be here, and we hope through this week-long programming, including another panel on Thursday that Tony, I'm sure, will let everyone know about. We give honor to Tony and all the staff and to the City of Seattle Office of Sustainability Environmental Justice Fund. We give honor to King County. We give honor to all of those organizations that support this really crucial list of issues around our sacred medicine wheel and our sacred medicine star life ways. So with that, we give thanks.
Hello, everyone. It's an honor to be here today and with all these amazing panelists. My name is Andrea Godinez, and I am the communications manager at King County Parks. I'm a part of our community engagement team, and we serve the entire county of King County, both unincorporated and also partner with local jurisdictions to provide parks, trails, natural areas, and other kinds of outdoor recreation to everyone who resides and visits here. And to me, environmental justice is the ability for every single person to have access to nature, to the outdoors, to healthy foods and water and air, and to have these available to them in ways that are culturally relevant and of vital importance for all of us, for our mental and our physical well-being.
Thank you, Brad. Hi, everyone. My name is Ashleigh Shoecraft. I'm the founder and executive director of Braided Seeds. We're a community-based nonprofit that focuses on providing opportunities for rest, restoration, and reconnection to the land, especially for community colors, centering the Black community in particular. To me, environmental justice directly counteracts the environmental racism that we've seen permeate this nation and even have a global impact. We know that communities of color are disproportionately impacted by air pollution, noise pollution, water pollution. They have the least access to healthy foods. So environmental justice requires a targeted act, especially of reparations, in terms of trying to figure out how can we undo and repair the harm that's been done by extending intentional access to these things, making sure that people have access to clean water, clean air, have access to silence. I think about often the Beacon Hill pause as a Seattle native, how you have the planes that are going overhead and people just don't get to have access to silence, which is normal in some communities. Or I'm a part of the gentrified Seattle contingency. So I had to move to Tacoma and learned, yeah, there are large plots of land where you can't grow food in your garden because there's arsenic in the soil, or you have the Tacoma aroma that inhibits your ability to have access to fresh air. So environmental justice is looking at, okay, we know that this is disproportionately impacting communities of color. What are some targeted effects that we can do to help repair that reality now and through legislation in the future?
Hi everyone, I'm Nancy Huizar. I use they, them pronouns, and I'm the founder of NH Consulting. It's a consulting firm. Most of my clients are government agencies and local community-based organizations. I grew up here in South Seattle, grew up in Beacon Hill. For me, the simplest way to describe environmental justice is the right to a safe and healthy environment for all, no matter your social economic status, your race, your sexuality, or gender. A story that I often tell when I'm talking to folks, my background is in aquatic and fisheries sciences. I wanted to study orca whales when I was younger. And it wasn't until after I graduated college that I really understood the impact of environmental injustices. And I knew this for a long time. My mom and my brother, they had asthma growing up. And when my mom immigrated here from the Philippines, she was 25, didn't have asthma. But as she lived in Beacon Hill all these years, she started to develop it. She mentioned with the airplanes, proximity to the freeways, things like that. And realizing that it's not always like this for folks in different communities around Seattle. So that's part of why I have shifted my work into supporting and doing more engagement with folks in our community, because like I said, I didn't learn about this until after I graduated college. And so to not know about these kinds of impacts is really disheartening. So that's part of my role in my consulting agency, is to make sure folks are informed and to be able to connect people to the different resources across the government agencies and within our own community, and how we can get support to combat these things.
All right, let's get into this. So this is an open, informal panel. So everybody can just jump in if you wanted to. One of the questions that I wanted to ask initially was, are environmental justice issues different in rural areas than they are in urban areas? And if they are, why? If they are not, why as well? So anybody jump in, your perspective, your opinion, your viewpoint on, again, environment.
Even the government 59 that set aside reservation land that were reduced down drastically for our Coast Salish peoples up and down the corridor coast, but that's a different treaty in a different area. On reservation, based on those treaties, there are sovereign rights that the tribes have that are answerable to courts of law and stand as living documents. However, urban areas, like for example, Tacoma has the 5th largest number of urban tribal residents in the city of Tacoma. City of Tacoma has a lack of trees index significant, more so than Seattle. Seattle has pockets of it. And this area is part of the low index numbers for that. Disconnection and removal of tribal peoples from their traditional lands overall, when you then look at the urban areas, the disconnection can be said is greater when people are not located on the reservation lands. And there's a list of reasons why that happens and how that happens. So I don't want to say something that someone who is enrolled in this area, but I would say, because our work is focused on reconnecting the displaced urban focused tribal people who are representative of that huge number by Census Bureau that live in the area and have lack of access on all kinds of just access to be able to go into parks and collect traditional native foods or collect bark off western red cedars that are disappearing based on contractors and builders who just want to cut down several 100-year to 1,000-year-old cedar trees. And then the disconnect of the relationship between the trees, the waters, the lack of salmon, the lack of other collectible foods and food sovereignty. It's huge. And these things are all part of discussions and work on reservations. However, financial and other resourcing in urban focused areas, Seattle, Tacoma, every city, town, and amongst this region is even more pronounced. And there's a lot of history as to how all of these things have occurred over time prior to 1859 and then leading up to now. The Bolt decision was just celebrated by a lot of the reservation tribal sovereign nations, and that has to do with fishing rights that originally Isaac Stevenson put into the treaties that tribal people had access to their traditional fishing lands. But in the 1870s, the whites decided they wanted to fish, and so then it became a battle. It became wars in terms of attaining that. And one of the key people is Billy Frank Jr., who's passed now, but his work began with fighting fishing rights, where he was arrested numerous times for just rights of the Nisqually to access their traditional fishing lands. So, and that goes all up and down the coast and out on the peninsula. So there are gradations of difference. The overall issues are similar, same in terms of tribal people of any sort, whether they're enrolled or unenrolled. And that can be for further discussion. So I'll give space for someone else to speak now. Thank you.
Thank you, Kim. Great information. Anybody want to follow up on what Kim says or add your own?
Yeah, I'll follow up. I agree that there's a gradient of how we're impacted. Thinking about folks in rural areas that are impacted by wildfires, for example, I don't have to move. I've never had to relocate, right? Because there's a wildfire in my community or neighborhood. I have to stay inside for a few days, and I can put an air filter on in my house and my indoor air quality will be fine. But there's also, we've seen impacts to farm workers, and when they have to continue to keep working outside, there's legislation now that folks are working on in the state so that if it is at a certain quality of air where it's like over 80, I think, or 100, then they can get PPE, but they still have to work. So we see those things around like who has to work in these kinds of conditions. And then we also see like thinking about water quality and water pollution. Better? Okay, I'm gonna keep going. Thinking about water pollution and where that comes from in a lot of rural areas. I used to work for a foundation that did grants for water quality improvements when people polluted, and there isn't really as much oversight in the rural areas as we do here locally and more urban.
And Andrea, Ashleigh?
Yeah, I can piggyback off of what Nancy said. I really think it depends, and I think that in rural versus urban areas, there's still exposure, but there are different types of exposure, right? First, every rural area isn't created equally, just like every urban area isn't created equally, right? So if you're in an area where there's like pervasive organic farming, then you have increased access to healthy foods, right? You know where your food comes from. But that isn't the case. Other farming communities rely heavily on pesticides, and it really does go to who's working that land, right? Who are the people who are most exposed to those toxins, and then the families that are absorbing them. So it depends, but I definitely think that exposure happens in both communities in different ways.
Andrea, do you want to?
Sure. I really appreciate and agree with the perspectives just shared. One thing just to consider is that there may be differences, but it is all interconnected. There's so much going on a global scale that also directly impacts and is interrelated with what we're seeing here in the Puget Sound region on the other side of the mountains. Our water quality, our snowcat melt, how much snow we're getting every year, and what that means to our river systems that come through all of our communities, and for salmon and for all of our ecosystems. It is something that touches every one of us, even if we are not going to a river every day or going to the mountains every day. And so I think there definitely are unique situations for people in all sorts of communities, tree cover, urban tree cover, heat in the summer. These are things that as a park system, we hear people very concerned about in our urban parks and trail areas, and needs for cooling stations, that maybe if you have more tree cover and shade in your area and you don't have heat from concrete bouncing back at you, it may not be as extreme. But I do see so much the interconnectivity, and how hearing from each other and keeping an eye on how things are changing, both locally and at a global scale, is critical.
I'm gonna move on. Does anybody have any additional feedback about anything that was said before? And if you do, you can bring that up as well. One of the things is the rich, and there are a lot of studies that show this, that rich folks generate more pollution but pay less in environmental protection than the poor and low income. First of all, what do you think about what I just said, and explain how that works? Anybody want to tackle that?
Well, I would first say one of the first issues to look at is the redlining and the locations where underserved, lower socioeconomic groups of people are located along freeways, along highways, roadways. And the people who have money or more moneyed and have that coming in are in wooded areas. They're in beautified, again, as mentioned already, the sound, sound that is another form of pollution, that you have to be aware that there is all that grouping, and the ones who do have the funds and the money. I mean, we could get into some real hardcore issues on that. You could look at taxing, you could look at job pay, you could look at access to jobs that are financially viable to be able to not just survive, but live in a place of well-being that brings about better health. I totally agree with what you say, Tony. There's a huge gap with all that, and it goes back a long time, a very long time. And the impacts are still being felt.
Rich folks create more pollution, but pay less. Help me understand, help all of us understand why the system works that way. And again, you're listening to Rainier Avenue Radio World. It's me, Tony B. This is our conversation on what is environmental justice. That doesn't seem, if you're going to use this word, fair. Any comments, any additional feedback?
We live in a disposable world. So if you are rich and you have, just an example, maybe you buy expensive plastic cutlery and plates to eat every night, and you go out to restaurants all the time where there is use of resourcing that goes into then the landfills and goes into areas we're not even fully aware of, then you're polluted. You're also looking at what kind of cars do you drive, and what's the impact of the pollution going into the air that affects the ozone. More people who have higher income have cars, and they may have more than one. They may have boats. They may have trailers and RVs that they take across the country. where many others don't even have a car. They have to take public transportation. So when you start getting into those areas of daily living into long-term, that contributes. I mean, Billy Frank Jr. years ago at a Northwest Climate Change Summit, Indigenous Healing Solutions we did at Seattle U, said that the garbage and the recycle all goes to the same place. It gets sold. Now, this is a few years ago, but he said he researched it with his team, Northwest Indian Fisheries Commission. It got sold down to Oregon to go into landfill. Well, those are probably filled by now. That was in 2008, 2009. So where's all that going now? Out into the oceans. And if you look at the amount of, someone who isn't as economically privileged, you buy a set of plates that you wash every day. So that's just one example. Thank you.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. The carbon footprint of the rich is much larger, and yet communities of color, low-income communities, are paying the price. With our health, right? Like, I recently saw a statistic that the Black community in particular, the amount of air pollution consumed is 40 to 50% more than is produced. And so you have these like health disparities that are rising as a result of the exposure, and no acknowledgement of where this exposure is coming from, and no acts of trying to figure out how can we reduce our footprint. So I completely agree.
I also agree. Recently, Taylor Swift has gotten some criticism because she's, taking her private jet to go to different places around the U.S. And thinking about how, like with the fossil fuel industry, for example, they get a lot of tax incentives to continue to sustain and to build more projects, even as our governments are trying to say that they want to reduce climate emissions, when really they're looking for solutions that would allow people to continue to pollute, but try to mitigate in a way that will kind of continue that facade of, oh, we're doing better, but really we're just doing the same thing, but doing things like carbon sequestration so that it's less bad, even though we're still putting all of this into the air. I think with things like that, with industry-led solutions, we're going to continue to see and have a difficulty reducing emissions and combating things like air pollution and water pollution and all of the injustices that we've seen already facing our community.
And I just want to add that the impact, it isn't just local, but it's global. And so when you look at the carbon emissions of like different nations and who's paying the largest price, you often see developing countries that are really paying the price of not just like individual wealth, but like national emissions. So recently I got to go to Ghana and did a coastal trip, and the sea line of Ghana, it's eroding. And so you can see they've lost within the last several years hundreds of meters of their coast, which is threatening like the like local businesses and everything. Whereas here we're like, oh yeah, like it's a problem that's far off or it's away from us. But for the communities that are being impacted by like our decisions or by the decisions of the industries that we're proximate to, there are other communities, specifically the global majority communities of color, that are really being impacted in a way that is touching them right now, not in the future.
You're listening to Rainier Avenue Radio World. This discussion, this panel, what is environmental justice? We will be back after a short break, and we're going to tackle again.
It's like Oscar speech.
All right. We're going to be back, and we're going to tackle this issue a little bit further. And as you can hear, from what we said, at least from what I'm hearing, the costs of environmental protection are aggressively distributed. And it seems as though the folks who are hit the most, the poor, are hit the hardest by taxes and costs of pollution controls. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about some other things. We'll talk about everything. We'll be back right after this.
Okay to drink water.
Here with the Rainier Avenue Radio traffic update. You can listen to us in your car 24/7 anytime by downloading the free TuneIn app. Once you do, search Rainier Avenue Radio. And remember, do not curse out your fellow drivers. This has been your Rainier Avenue Radio traffic update.
Love food? Here's some storage tips to keep it fresh longer. Store cut fruits and vegetables in the fridge. Place in reusable containers. Keep bread in the freezer for longer storage. 40% of food in the U.S. goes uneaten. Save money, save food, save the planet. Visit Seattle Public Utilities for more tips.
Rainier Avenue Radio presents All Music, All Day Saturday. Music, all day Saturday.
This is Edward Bailey, Bulldog Blue.
Jazz from the Capitals.
That's right. It's time once again for Jazz from the Cabinets.
Start time.
Thanks for tuning in. My name is Paul.
This is Start Time.
Saturdays, all music, all day. Reggae out. K-Fox night.
Looking for the perfect beat? Yeah, it's the beat of the vibe.
Fresh juice. D-Money in there.
Myself, D-Money.
This is Sincere. The Northwest Rap Gang.
DJ Medina. Northwest Rap Gang.
Sergio Lacour's Love Line.
It's Sergio's Love Lines with Sergio LaCour. Go to the phone lines. Hello.
Sea Monster Radio. Mojang. It's your day.
We're live. Welcome to Mojang Mondays. This is KZ, KB Music Media. Caller Goddess for Mojang Mondays.
Just like God is inspiration all day and all night. Saturday. Rainier Avenue Radio.
Wash your hands, don't touch your face, wipe things down, clean up your space. When you cough and sneeze, do responsibly. If you feel you're getting ill, isolate at home and chill. No, you're not alone. Please pick up your phone and call 206-477-3977. King County 206-477-3977. Public Health 206-477-3977. King County 206-477-3977. Public Community Radio Station will provide you with more information. Say Rainier Avenue Radio. Your community radio station will provide you with more information. Rainier Avenue Radio.
The beat of the Fox with nastiness is back on K-Fox Night Beat.
Yo, what's the deal? It's the legendary Hall of Fame DJ Mixmaster Ice, UTFO.
What's up? Who do you thought this is? This is Sir Mix-a-Lot.
And this is Terry Lewis.
And I'm Grand Mixer GMS.
What's up, y'all? This is DJ Third Degree.
This is JJ Hudson from the High Children family.
Sunday nights from 9 p.m. to 11 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. It's K-Fox Night Beat with DJ Nastiness.
Bringing back the memories.
Bringing back the memories.
Bringing Seattle's hottest music.
Bringing Seattle's hottest music. Rainier Avenue Radio.world.
Noise.
Peace.
Greetings. This is your host, DJ Neftali, Rainier Avenue Radio.world. The best DJ in the Seattle area. You can catch me every Monday at 8 p.m. on YouTube. Like I said, this is DJ Neftali, the best reggae in Seattle, Washington, the best radio station, Rainier Avenue Radio.world. Come on, right?
We need your help finding community members to help shape the future of your utilities and the environment. we have two exciting opportunities for the public to work with Seattle Public Utilities, the Customer Review Panel, CRP, and the Solid Waste Advisory Committee, SWAC. CRP and SWAC are looking for new members to contribute expertise and passion to help improve utility services and advance our commitment to environmental stewardship and social justice. Applications can be found at seattle.gov/utilities/community-advisory-recruitment. Hey, can you run that back? Applications can be found at seattle.gov/utilities/community-advisory-recruitment. Thank you. Application deadline for both opportunities is Tuesday, April 23rd. Would you like to see when your favorite Rainier Avenue Radio show comes on? Check out our show schedule, updated weekly at rainieravenuradio.world.
Issues that impact in urban communities as well. I want to talk a little bit more about some of those issues. A number of studies have shown that urban communities of color contain disproportionate number of hazardous and solid waste facilities. I will tell you this, that African Americans are not just predisposed to have asthma or diabetes. So we're going to talk about that a little bit more and get into what some of these issues are, if this is an issue, how it impacts you, if it does impact you. Ashleigh, we were talking when we were on break a little bit, so I'm gonna come to you first on this issue.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think the health disparities that especially impact the Black community are pervasive. And something that's really interesting to me is I do think that environmental racism plays into that, right? Like, I think it is one of many causes that impacts communities. And something that I especially care about with my work at Braided Seeds is creating access to the outdoors. In some countries, time outdoors is actually prescribed as a prescription, right? Like, doctors will write a prescription for time outdoors because access to the outdoors or time like around nature or immersed in a natural environment actually is a remedy to a lot of the disparities that we experience, right? Like, it's been proven to help relieve hypertension, like access to clean air helps people who have asthma. If you have high blood pressure, right? It's a remedy. And yet, it's especially for the Black community, so many of us have an estranged relationship with the outdoors, where it's like, no, that's not for us. Like, this is something that only white people do. Like, we can't go to these places. And so it's really interesting the ways that this is not accidental, right? It isn't like this just happened, but like historically within the United States, not only have we been positioned to be most impacted by environmental racism, but we've also been intentionally estranged from sources of wellness and life and health, which is just really interesting. And yeah, I'll let other people dive into their thoughts about that or other relationships to the question.
Yeah. Go ahead, Kim.
I would just, I'm in agreement, and you can put Indigenous tribal peoples in what Ashleigh just said. And in addition, to have better understanding about those disconnections, you have to look at the history of colonialism, and you have to look at the history of the reservation system that is very similar to the apartheid system in South Africa. That when you start to place people on reservation lands, that pulls them away from their traditional fishing areas, forest lands for gathering, mountainous areas for similar same, and then the traditional foods that kept everyone healthy. where there weren't all of these diseases that come out of a Euro-Caucasian framework and context, that then you start to look at, there's a huge number of our tribal people who have type 1 and type 2 diabetes. And it's based on food, it's based on lack of exercise, it's based on a lot of those factors. And then some of the other mental that is tied into then addictions that then pervasively impact people. We just recently had a key tribal person pass from cancer, liver cancer, that was connected to probably drinking. So as you look at that, it's on reservation, off reservation, it's across the United States, it's up in Canada, and those are just, the disparity is huge, and the health impacts are huge. And access to medical, insurance and medical facility, that takes money unless you live on a reservation. Not everyone can go to a health center on a reservation if you don't have an enrollment card of that tribe. Some do, some you can't. So that again contributes.
I'll add that, growing up and going to school, I was one of the only people of color in my program in college. And when I started working my first job, people told me, as the only person of color staff, people of color don't care about the environment. And I'm like, this is the wildest thing that I've ever heard.
Well, say that again?
People of color don't care about the environment, apparently. Because whenever they ran their programs, it was mostly white folks that came, right? They're not translating material, they're not engaging in the community in a ways that's culturally relevant. So why would folks come when it's like, oh, that's just another thing for them, kind of thing. And so with that, I really started to think about why is that and why do we talk about things in this way? Because, growing up, like I said, my mom had asthma, but she would do things like to save electricity, put out clothes on the drying outside to dry outside. We would do things to conserve electricity because that is how we survive. And that is inherent for us in taking care of the land and being with, trying to support the land versus, doing the take and not doing the regenerative work that we're starting to learn more about today. And I think now too about all of the young people growing up and folks who have climate anxiety and don't really know what to do with their life because they're in panic mode about how we're going to continue with a future where to them we're doomed. Thinking about all the things that we're hearing about species extinctions, thinking about like how much more people are affected by air quality and sea level rise. It's giving young folks a hard time to really see themselves in the future. And then also thinking about other things like diabetes. Diabetes also runs in my family, and thinking about access to healthy food. Like I said, I grew up in the neighborhood too, and McDonald's was just down the hill. We had a lot of fast food places, and there wasn't really a grocery store that we could just walk to within 10 minutes, which is now like one of the indicators that the city of Seattle is using to like make walkable neighborhoods. So I'm looking forward to kind of seeing how policy changes can help impact these things. Like I think the Duwamish River Community Action Plan, Duwamish Valley Community Action Plan is one way that we can kind of track how cities, programs, and CBO partnership will impact our communities and how we can benefit from those. And I'm hoping that we can see more things like that, more collaboration, and have easier ways to kind of track how we're actually seeing those benefits within our communities. Because long-term planning, it's hard to stay sustained and to keep people interested in that when you're not seeing the impact in the day-to-day.
Andrea, do you want to add to this?
Yeah, I would love to. Just kind of along these chains of thought, King County has been looking at a couple of different factors in terms of how we can better serve the community, especially those who are the most impacted by climate change and pollution. And one of the ways that they're addressing it is by looking at three major factors. One is the rate of heart disease and diabetes and other chronic diseases the communities are facing. Another factor is those in the lowest income brackets in our society. And then third is the access to outdoor spaces or parks. And for an urban area, I believe it's a 1/4 mile distance. And for a more rural area, I believe it's 2 miles. So looking holistically across the county. And not surprisingly, that often lines up directly with communities of color who are in those what are called opportunity areas. And we're looking at multiple different initiatives to try and help address those disparities. And it's only the beginning. This is so complex and nuanced and deep-seated systemic issues. But how can we invest more? How can we create more green spaces and welcoming spaces that make sense for communities to go and utilize how they want to? And I think that having parks and trails and outdoor spaces are critically important in addressing some of these items, but then also just for our general mental and physical and social well-being. We saw more people going to parks and trails during the pandemic than ever before, from all different walks of life. And that has continued to be the case even as we come out of it, quote unquote. And I think how we can better utilize resources and really serve those who haven't had a seat at the table before is critically important. And one of the things that we're doing right now as a King County Park System is we're getting public input on what should be in the next King County Parks levy, if it's okay for me to mention that right now. The levy is a voter-approved tax, property tax that it funds the vast majority of the King County Park System, keeping them open, as well as providing community-based grants and other conservation initiatives. And it's coming, the next cycle is 2026 through 2031. And we're in the very early beginnings of developing what's in that levy package. And so we're asking people, especially from these areas that I was just describing, to share their feedback with us about what's important and what's needed in their communities. So whether it's through an online survey or through in-person or virtual community forums, we're trying to gather as much feedback as we can to try and help do our part to help address issues like that.
How do we get over this hurdle? I heard conversations, from both Ashleigh and Nancy about the potential of, I don't belong there. I don't belong in certain spaces. For King County Parks, that's what you do. You create spaces for people. How are you approaching this? What can be done to make those folks out there who are listening right now, who are watching right now, who are going, that's not for me. But at the same time, I'm hearing y'all connect mental health to environmental justice. So help me understand how we get this message across, that your mental health is part of environmental justice. And I'm really excited to have King County Parks here because I know y'all get that. And I know that you're trying to address the issue, which also goes into transportation justice.
Right.
If you can't get there and enjoy these spaces, all of these other things that are happening are magnified. So how do we do this? How do we get folks to say, this is impacting me, this is environmental justice. It's happening to me. Yeah, I'll let y'all take it from there. And Andrea, I guess I'm just going to start with you again because I know you're working.
Yeah.
And it's easier said than done. And then Ashleigh, I know you brought this up as well. Access, transportation justice. If this is a mental health issue, and I'll start with that, is environmental justice, is mental health an environmental justice issue?
I would agree that it is. Because I think Western society has disconnected humans from the environment, and that is not the case. We are deeply interconnected with the world around us. And so if we do not have access to the outdoors, I think this is my personal opinion, but I think it affects us as human beings. And so your mental health is connected to that world around you. And so to be able to be outdoors and to have those spaces where you can connect with each other and with the plants and the animals and the ecosystems, I think is critical. And that's one of the reasons why I chose to work for King County Parks, is I want to help make that accessible to more people. Now, to address it, that's incredibly complicated, but there's a lot of different things, like you said, Tony. What are some of the barriers that the people are facing? Whether it's a physical barrier or a psychological barrier, or if you don't feel safe, even if you can, walk down the street to your park, but if you don't see a space that feels like it's for you, maybe you're not going to want to go then. So we've been partnering with Metro on a couple of different transit to nature programs, including ones like Trailhead Direct that get you out to some of the mountain trails out in the I-90 corridor, as well as starting a community van partnership where anyone who has a group that wants to go out to any sort of recreation or park, doesn't have to be a King County Park, but you can get training on how to be a van driver and then get your group, your family, your church group, your community group to rent a van and be able to go out together to do things. But it's also providing information in multiple languages for people to know how to get there and what's available to them to utilize those parks. I mean, those are just two baseline things. But it is also, what's your proximity? And I think that's one of the reasons why looking at opportunity areas and that kind of factor of, is it within a quarter mile? Can you easily walk or bike or roll there? If you can't, then that's an issue. Even with transportation nearby, that might still be a barrier for you. I'm going to let other people have a chance.
Ashleigh, Nancy, Kim.
So our Windz a Change Alliance, we work close on the community level, and we have been doing some amazing work in partnership with Seattle Parks and Recreation here in Seattle. And our approach to that is to welcomingly include and invite, especially youth, because they are our future leaders, to then participate in environmentally focused programming. So all of the areas of the medicine wheel that many different tribes look at and utilize in various ways of physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual that are tied into a holistic life traditional framework. We are blessed this year to do a program at Camp Long. And this program is to connect people with indigenous trees and the relationships between the trees, the plants, the foods, the food sovereignties, all the other relations, for those who do not have the knowledge, do not have access to the knowledge, because anything tribal, even though the sovereignty curriculum exists with the Office of Instruction with the state of Washington, it's not implemented at every single school. And education is key, and access and presence is key. But without those factors, we then have taken on. We're activating Lickteed Springs Park up north near Northgate. We've been activating Lake City with their festival and parade, downtown with the lake, the Torchlight Parade, with other programming that brings about the teachings of honoring the waters, the lands, the peoples, and all of those relations. And it ties into the health in all those 4 medicine areas. So we're real community driven. And when we do this, it's located in Seattle, but it's calling in and pulling in all the tribal people that live anywhere 50 to 200 miles away, because they are the voices, they are the elders, they are the medicine people who then come in and bring what they bring to all of this. We just set up the framework, and then that happens. So it's ongoing.
Nancy, Ashleigh, y'all want to jump in on this? And I'm going to kind of speak for some of the folks out there who may be listening right now. You know what? I have work. I have to take care of kids. I'm too tired to try to find my way to some park and be in the environment. But again, what we're hearing is that those barriers are the barriers that may be contributing to mental health. I don't know, Ashleigh, Nancy, I'd like to get your thoughts on this, because again, this is part of the connecting these issues of environmental justice to those who are impacted the most.
Thanks for that kind of segue in, Tony. I have a little story for you guys. So I've been mentoring with Young Women Empowered for the last 5 years. And last year I took a break. At Young Women Empowered, I mentored for their GROW program, where we take young folks out to Kamara farm and we farm. We're out there on Saturdays where, we're weeding, we're putting down mulch, we're growing food, and then the food goes to South Park community and Duwamish Valley area or to local food banks. And when I took a break last year, I noticed I developed an eye twitch, and it was really bad. I started with this eye, and then I started with this eye, and then at one point, like, my eye just wouldn't stop. And I think that is because going to the farm every Saturday gave me that structure to be able, like, okay, I'm going to set 3 hours a week to go out and intentionally be outside with the youth. And in that program, what we would always do to start the day is we would greet the land. And so we would go find a spot in the garden. You want to sit by the sunflowers, by the green beans. You can just sit there. We sit down, put our hands on the ground so that we can feel the earth. And then we tell the earth, like, oh, this is how I'm feeling today. This is what's going on in my life. I need help holding this. And then in return, you say back, like, today I'm hopeful to, weed some of these areas, or to start to set space for our squash or for the corn, things like that. And I think bringing in that intention is what is important for me when I think about environmental work, because it allows that space to slow down. Like, I feel like in our society, you're always on the grind. You have to keep working, versus when you want to go to the park, you're taking a slow little walk to the park, or you're seeing some friends and having a picnic. It offers connection too with other folks in your life. I feel like, growing up, we would always go to the park and have barbecues. And when we were doing some planning a few years ago with, I think it was City of Seattle parks, people were talking about how important keeping those barbecue pits were, because it was an opportunity for folks to bring in their families. As we're seeing more density too, there isn't a lot of open space or space to host bigger family gatherings, like a lot of BIPOC folks experience or like to do. And so having those kinds of spaces where you feel like you can belong and you can do things like cook a meal for your family is really important. And I think that connection, especially, after the pandemic, is something that people were missing. Like, I've seen so many articles that are like, millennials are so lonely because they don't have any friends. And thinking about, like, how is that related to the environment? Well, we're losing a lot of opportunities to be outside and to be together in these kinds of spaces, because we're not seeing investments in parks in our local neighborhoods, or they're not safe, or we're getting wildfire smoke, so we can't spend time in them, things like that. And just wanting to bring back, with the youth specifically, that's where I've heard a lot of the climate anxiety, and just not having that space to be able to talk about it, or to know, like, what can I do then when I have to focus on how am I going to make money? How am I going to survive? We need to be creating those spaces where people can come together and be able to talk things like that through, to find solutions for themselves and not have to rely on, like, oh, the city is going to be the one to take care of it. Because we've seen time and time again, we can't always just rely on one entity to try to solve our problems, because if we're not involved in this kind of work, then we get stepped on, right? Like, we've seen things like redlining, seen things like less investments in our communities because we haven't had a voice or a space to be in that place. And I think, again, like what you're saying, Tony, people are too busy for that. There are alternative ways to make things fun. It doesn't have to be, we're going to do a town hall, come tell us your appointment or what your opinions are, or we're going to do a community survey. Those things aren't fun, right? We've heard that from our folks. We want to see more like block parties. How are we doing engagement on this kind of work? And let's make a zine and talk about, here's the priorities that we've heard so far. Is this right? Do you want to make a zine of your own so that you can tell us what those priorities are? Those are some strategies now that I've seen in my consulting work that our people are more receptive to.
Ashleigh?
Yeah, I absolutely agree that I think that there are a lot of misconceptions around accessing the outdoors, thinking that there's a right or a wrong way to do it, right? And I think often in the media, what a lot of communities see is you see people hiking or like conquering this mountain. You see people like rowing across Lake Washington. You see these things that seem super like you have to be up to something. And I think that one thing that's necessary is debunking that. There's no right way and there's no wrong way to be outdoors, right? Like the land can actually be a conduit for rest, right? You don't have to do anything in Lake Washington but be there. You don't have to swim, you can float, right? You don't have to hike up the mountain, you can do a scenic drive, right? I think proximity and helping people have on-ramps to engage in a way that works for them is super important. I think another thing, especially as it relates to people who think that the outdoors aren't for them or that it's only for people who are white or just that it's just like they just don't do it, is making space for people to tell their stories, right? Why? What happened, right? Because whatever happened that made you feel unsafe was not right. Like you do have a right to be here. You do have a right to take up space here. I think that's something that we hold really well in our programs. Like I know sometimes we'll go on hikes and people will look at us and be like, y'all on a family reunion or like what's going on? And so like we're trying to really be intentional about normalizing that we can be here, that we have a right to be here, right? That no one has the right to make us feel unsafe. I think so on the individual level in terms of cultivating some connection with the outdoors. Yeah, I think it has to do with building those on-ramps, which honestly fosters a lot of curiosity, right? Like maybe you float and then you want to swim, or you sit on a paddleboard and then you want to kayak, right? Like there are ways that they're little baby steps to forming a different relationship that can help then impact some of those health disparities. But I also think on the systemic side, right, as we're hearing from communities, yeah, we don't do this. We don't have access to that. We have to interrogate why, right? What are those barriers to access and how can we remove those barriers? So one of the things that we do is in order to get into state parks, you have to pay a $10 fee, which is a barrier for a lot of people. It's been a barrier for me. I've got like 5 tickets from state parks from not paying that $10 fee, honestly, because sometimes I just didn't have it, right? But I wanted to be outside. And so thinking about how can we make parks free for all, right? Recently, Mount Rainier, which just to say, Washington has one of the most beautiful park systems in the nation, and yet a lot of communities of color have never been able to access them. So thinking about the choices that we're making and are they leading to increased access or less access? One of the things we participated in recently was advocating against a timed entry system for Mount Rainier, because it adds another barrier to communities who don't have the time to like, no, I'm gonna be off, 3 months in advance to be able to book this time slot. It prioritizes, again, people who are wealthy, people who already have this embedded into their normal lifestyle. And then thinking about gear, right? Like a lot of negative experiences outside are caused because people don't have what they need, right? If you don't have hiking boots and you're trying to hike and your feet hurt and you're like, I don't like hiking. Nobody out here who regularly hikes is hiking in Jordans, okay? They're hiking in like shoes that were designed for hiking. And so thinking about how can we extend access in that way. So one of the things we do is we have a community gear library that's available for any individual to come and say, hey, I want to borrow these snowshoes, or I want to borrow these tents, or I want to borrow this backpack, gear that historically is pretty expensive. You can borrow on a trust-based system. Nothing is required of you. You can borrow it for up to 2 weeks and then you just bring it back. And so, yeah, those targeted efforts of how can we remove barriers that have historically created an insider and an outsider club is really essential.
You're listening to Rainier Avenue Radio World, and this is Earth Deserves More Than a Day. We're going to run out of time here really quick, but I want to ask each of you a question. I know for me, the thing that had me become more engaged with environmental justice, it wasn't that the polarized caps were melting. It wasn't climate change. I knew I'd heard all that stuff. But when I found out the impact that some of these other things that are under the banner of environmental justice are, because I didn't even put them under environmental justice, that were happening to Black people. And I wasn't hearing the messaging. I wasn't hearing that awareness. That's what engaged me to say, I need to do more. I need to be more invested in this. That was my personal thing. So I want to ask each of you, Nancy, I'm going to start with you. Was there a seminal moment that you remember when you were like, hey, this is, and it doesn't just have to be local. It doesn't just have to be based on it's a global impact that we're talking about here. Let's not forget that. But what engaged you to become involved in the level that you are for environmental justice? Was there a seminal moment that happened?
Yeah, I tell this story all the time. In my opening, I mentioned that my mom has asthma, and so does my brother, so does my best friend, right? So growing up, I'm like, oh, that's normal. People have that. But then I worked for an organization that was trying to depave some parking lots and putting in trees and shrubs. That's great. It's a great program, right? Because if you're depaving, then it's less heat island effect, you're getting more trees for shade, air quality improvement with adding more greenery. Great, right? A project that we did in the city of Tacoma, like so much support from the city, different partners, got lots of volunteers out, and it was in a predominantly Black and brown neighborhood. But when I went to go work that day, it was mostly white folks as a volunteer base. And I remember as I'm planting these things, all of the folks who actually lived in the neighborhood looking at us like, what are they doing here? And I remember that feeling of like, oh, this is what I've been learning about. This is what people are talking about when we talk about environmental injustice, where things are happening without the folks who actually live there. They're not going to benefit from this because they don't know what's happening. This is part of how gentrification also happens with, the green gentrification is what some folks call it. And I didn't want to be a part of that. I didn't want to continue my career just doing things because I thought that they were good for people. And I didn't want organizations that I work with to operate in that way either. So I switched to doing community organizing work because I was like, I want folks to know what's happening to us and like how my mom's asthma is connected to programs like this, where she doesn't know what's happening to her or what solutions are being made for her, and really wanting to center communities and their solutions to combating environmental and climate injustice.
Kim, and all of you are going to get this question. Kim, I'm going to go to you because I'm feeling like for you, this is a way of life. Is this something that you've grown up with and being Native, Indigenous, did that have an impact? Is this just a way of life? How did you become engaged in environmental justice?
I'll start with, I was born in Yellowstone. I grew up in the Park Service. I then grew up in other significant years in the Olympics under cedar trees and elk in the yard and raccoons and other, we even had bear come down. Yes, it's a way of, it's one aspect of place, and tribal people are connected to place. Place is the environment. Place is where you are with your family, your extended family, with the tribal community, with others in that community. And it's part of, it's so interwoven into your way of life that to now separate it out and that just falls into sort of that Euro-Caucasian colonial context where you box everything. And it's a way of life. That's key. And when you look at the research, the writings, the actual activities that happen, it has everything to do with the lands you're standing on, the waters that you access for various reasons, how you collect your foods, how you do what you do in your sacred spaces and places. And when you look at then history and the historical trauma, and you look at then being disconnected from the place and those elements of the place, then it gives greater understanding as to the work that happens with tribal leaders, tribal community people, and so forth, and reconnecting to bring back. So thank you, Tony, for asking that.
And Andrea, same question. I know that you work for King County Parks. Why this work in environmental justice? And is it for you more of the work that you do at King County Park specifically? That drove this for you? Just same question. What sparked your interest? What motivated you to say, this is the work that I want to do?
Sure, I love that question. Thank you for asking each of us. It's hard to pinpoint a particular time for me personally because I was very privileged growing up to be connected to the outdoors. I grew up in the Seattle area, but there was more green space around us. And my family was not rich, but we were doing okay, and we could go camping for free, and we could do, just a lot more outdoors than I think people have access to now. And I just was always outside. Like, I was climbing a tree, I was doing cartwheels in a parking lot. Like, it didn't matter where I was doing something outside. So, that was such a pivotal part of my personal life that I've always felt deeply connected to wanting to make that experience for other people. And to me, parks is really critical because there are so few places that are open to anyone to go to now where you don't have to pay for it. And a local county or city park is one of those last few places. It's like libraries, parks, maybe a couple of other like community centers, or particular gathering spaces, but at large it's libraries and parks are outside. And I don't mean to oversimplify it, but that's what it seems like to me. And being able to have that space where it really is supposed to be a community resource, and how you use it could be as diverse as the person next to you wants to use it. And so to be able to just make that connection and take care of and steward and also acknowledge the land and the history and who has been connected to it and is still connected to it, I think it is a really important way for us to have more enriching, higher qualities of life.
Okay, Ashleigh, same thing. And you get your hands dirty. And I don't know if it was gardening or same question. What inspired you? Was it just a way of life for you? Was it something that was done in your home? And it's interesting hearing the backgrounds of each of you. So I am curious, Ashleigh, same question for you. Was there a moment in time that you said, you know what, this is environmental justice, and I feel compelled to share what you do with more folks? I don't know, I'm just talking. I'm waiting for you to talk.
Yeah, I got you. So I am a Pacific Northwest native. I was born and raised in Washington, and I grew up camping, playing outside, and I loved it. I think for me, being outside, whether it's immersed around trees or being by the beach, it's my sacred place. It's where I feel at home. I feel grounded. It's where I find God. And so I mean, it's my bread and butter. And I worked for a campus ministry where I was responsible for helping connect Black students with other students in the region, and it happened at a camp. So my job was to invite other people to come to this camp. And I had the hardest time convincing these students to come to the woods where there was a lake. Like, they were like, I almost drowned in a lake one time. No, or like, they just were very much like, you lost me at camp. And so I think for me, it's been a source of grief to discover that this place that I feel safe, that I feel home, like other people don't have access to, right? And like wanting to be able to understand, the historical realities that have made that the case, but also wanting for us to stop paying the price of like our history, right? Wanting for us to be able to have new connections and new relationships with the outdoors, especially with climate change happening. It's like, now is really the time, because I can see Diablo Lake, right, in the North Cascades, and it brings up a lot of grief to know that there are so many people that will never see it because they don't think that they can, or that that's a place that they can be. So for me, that's what drives me.
And it's interesting that both you and Andrea grew up camping.
Mm-hmm.
And so in one instance, that kind of dispels the myth, you know what I mean? That Black folks don't engage in that way. I had an experience where we were talking about getting outdoors, and a gentleman said to me, absolutely not. I'm not going into the woods. I'm Black. It's too many white people.
Mm.
And I know how it sounds when I say that, but you know what I'm saying.
Mm.
So it's a real thing. We're just about out of time here, and I want to give everybody an opportunity for final words. And my question is going to be, what is environmental justice after we had this dialogue? And so you can answer it again however you want to. I just ask you to share this information with our audience so that when they think about it, your last impressions will be something that are on their mind. I want to remind everybody, we're going to be here for 5 days with these discussions. Coming up next, we'll be talking to the Black Farmers Collective. After that, we'll be talking to YMCA Earth Service Corps, and we'll have a youth engagement portion of that. Tomorrow, Nancy's going to be back at 9:30 in the morning to talk about resilience hubs. We've also got a conversation on Rent Smart, and that presentation is by Solid Ground. Communities of Conscious, efforts to protect communities of color, Circular Economy Business Park. Whew. You know, Andrea, what that is and what that means.
I'm learning too.
Okay, yeah, and that has to do with solid waste and disposable, and just a bunch of stuff that we think is reusable, but it's not actually reusable. And then on Wednesday, we've got the Women of Wisdom from Tri-Cities, sharing Eastern Washington's community-based environmental solutions. Urban League of Metropolitan Seattle, we're doing a presentation. The Transit Writers Union, Communities and Clean Water. We have so much stuff. That's just a couple of days. Tomorrow, Charlie and I will be here to give you more of an update on what's taking place tomorrow, what took place today. And we'll be here again for 5 days because Earth deserves more than a day. I'd like to thank each of you for joining us, and I certainly want to give each of you an opportunity for final words. If there are things that you want to say to our audience right now, from whatever perspective you have. For me, I'm trying to bridge some of the connections to communities of color who are experiencing environmental justice but don't understand that that's what it is, and it's connected to all these things that we're talking about. And there are many different factors of environmental justice. Yes, it's important that we concern ourselves with big picture things as well. But as I mentioned before, folks are saying, hey, you know what? I have work, I have kids, I don't have time. And I'm already stressed out. Well, part of that stress might be some of the barriers and access that you don't have that are environmental justice issues. So again, our guest, Kim Kamara from Winds of Change, Andrea Godinez from King County Parks, Ashleigh Shoecraft from Braided Seeds, and Nancy Huizar of NH Consulting. Kim, I started off with you, and so I'm going to start off with you again. What is environmental justice? We've had a conversation about it now. Now we're back to what is environmental justice?
Environmental justice is respect, reconnection for welcoming inclusion, understanding First Peoples, our First Peoples of these lands, waters, and everywhere around us. It is relationship, key to everything. Relationships with our peoples, with our place, with our sacred spaces, with our identity, with where we are physically, emotionally, mentally, and spiritually, and all of our relations that come in various different forms. Like our tree people, our rock people, our salmon people, and all of those. And as we come together in forums such as this, it's about walking together with collective collaboration that brings all of these things together. Relationship, respect, honoring, solutioning, and bringing about those changes that impact everybody. As a pebble is thrown into Lake Washington or wherever, those waves ripple throughout everywhere. So to be aware, have understanding, and be cognizant of those things. So again, we thank you on behalf of our Coast Salish peoples, our coastal peoples, all the peoples that are across the mountains, across the United States, South, our First Nations relations, our relations in Hawaii, Alaska, our relations across the many places, Mongolia, Asia, everywhere where Indigenous peoples walk and come together. So with that, we would like to give thanks. We hold our hands up to each and every one of you here in this room as you go out, as we interweave the connections amongst one another so that we make the cedar fabric as the hat I wear. The cedar hat stronger with resilience so we can continue this, so that we can do this from past, future, forward for our leadership that will come ahead of us that we are now enculturating. So we give thanks. We give respectful thanks to anyone and everyone. Thank you.
Executive Director, Winds of Change, Kim Kamara. Andrea, what is environmental justice?
Well, I'm going to blow it up really big. And kind of following Kim in my own way, it's everything, really. I mean, we are not separate from the world around us. And you have a right to be a part of it, to be connected, to have access to the plants and the animals and the mountains and this amazing place that we're so lucky to live in. This natural beauty, it's a part of everyone. And to be able to have access to that is a human right. And so to me, environmental justice really encompasses a lot. I mean, it's everything that's going on in our world. And I would just like to say, as working for King County Parks, there are a lot of resources that we provide, but we also need to hear from you and to address and listen and to hear what is important, especially to those who have been underserved and don't have regular access or don't feel welcome and safe in outdoor spaces. And so I just really hope that if you don't mind sharing some time with us, that you would fill out either an online survey that we have available in dozens of languages at kingcounty.gov/parkslevy, or attend a virtual community meeting. We're having one tomorrow night to share your thoughts, or we'll even be here tabling throughout the week if you'd like to come down to the Columbia City Theater and talk to us. We just really want to be able to hear from people as much as possible so that we can better serve our entire county. Thanks for the plug.
Executive Director, I'm sorry, Andrea, what is your title again? Because the county has long titles.
Oh, I'm the communications manager for parks.
Okay, that's it? There's no 10 words?
Not for me.
Thank you. And Ashleigh Shoecraft, Executive Director of Braided Seeds.
Yeah, I'd say that environmental justice looks like access to parks. It looks like clean water. It sounds like being able to hear yourself in conversation, being able to hear the birds and the bugs. It smells like clean air. It smells like the natural sense of the environment, like grass. And it feels like safety. It feels like you belong, like you have a connection that's your own, that's defined by your desire to be in connection with the outdoors. So that's environmental justice for me.
And Nancy.
Yeah, to me, environmental justice is an invitation.
Oh, I forgot. Founder of NHuizar.
Yeah.
Consultant.
Yeah. It's just me, so there's not too much out there. But yeah, to me, environmental justice is an invitation for healing. The people that I work with in this sector care about economic justice, social justice, food justice, health justice, all of that. And really, if there's something that you care about in one of those sectors, you'll find community in this space. And because of that, I want to mention a few resources. If you just want to learn more about what environmental justice is, what's happening locally or nationally, the City of Seattle has a couple of funds. They have the Environmental Justice Fund that Kim mentioned earlier for the Duwamish Valley specifically. They have the Duwamish Valley Opportunity Fund. There's also going to be a lot of job opportunities coming in the future with different agencies, government agencies to do like creating pump stations, creating grant opportunities, more of them, to do different kinds of things like that. So I think if it's not something that you're interested in now, just think about the job market and what you could be doing in a green job where you're not breathing in chemicals all the time or having to be outside in really hot conditions for working and you don't feel like your employer cares about you. There's opportunity to start to create these kinds of different systems that will help better our health, will give us better access to the things that we've talked about today, and to really support our communities so that we are healthier in the future. And I'm really looking forward to that. And, if you see me in the street, I'm always happy to talk about this stuff. I'm really excited by the opportunity and the people that I get to work with. And so I'm always, like I said, happy to talk more about this. You can look me up on LinkedIn to learn more about anything that I mentioned today.
And before we go, we are going to take a question.
My question is for, can you hear me? Can you hear me? My question is for each and every one of you. I understand the whole thing of it, but have you really seek for the mental part They don't have those computers. They don't have those ways, access to get in touch with. Have you done boots on the ground? Have you went out there and did surveys with them personally, talk to them, and really sit down? Not just one day, 5 days a week. You have done that.
Oh, is this for me?
Yeah, for all of you.
Okay.
Yeah, the question is, have you really done your homework person to person? Because there's a lot of people out there. I do it every day, constantly go feed peoples and find the mental, the ones that's on drugs and this and that. You're talking about the environment. The environment starts if we really gonna help someone. Do we really love someone? You love someone, you ain't got to love them, but you got to love. God gave you love. He wakes you up every morning. So that's where I'm at with this situation, because we always saying we put these things out here to help people, but are we really helping someone? Or your suggestion is best for that person? That's what we need to find out. Have y'all did the survey correctly?
Well, that's the question. Sounds like to me, he wants to know if you're putting in the work. What that looks like, and different people do different things. So we'll go ahead. If everybody wants to quickly answer that question.
I mean, I can go first. So I'm the founder of Braided Seeds, and a lot of the work we do is rooted in the experience of me as someone who's rooted in the Black community and who's rooted in this place, right? So yeah, we have had conversations with numerous community members. I think something that's hard though, when you're working with a specific community, is it's easy for people to think that those people are monoliths, right? That they all believe the same thing. And so a lot of our work around removing barriers honors the fact that people can engage in their own way, right? You can find what works for you, because I can't, right? I know someone else, she don't do bugs and she don't do sleeping on the floor. So for her, she's gonna find a retreat center, right? There are other people who like to hike. There are other people who like to trail run, right? So I think in having conversations with people in community and learning about their experiences, you're better able to, number one, affirm that your experience is your own, right? It's not for me to tell you that the outdoors is safe, because it honestly, a lot of the times isn't, right? It is to tell you that there's a way that you can experience safety, right?
No, I see it differently because, first of all, I was in Boy Scout.
Let me. Oh, I want to give him a chance to answer.
Sure, I can go next. Yeah, for me, like I said, I was a community organizer before I started doing consulting, and in the community organizing, we would do door knocking, go and canvas with folks. And when I was working with Got Green, we would give away box fans with filters, because that's when we started seeing wildfires. And people don't have ACs, so they open their windows, but then they get all the polluted air coming in. So being able to give those away, people really appreciated that. And then that would offer the opportunity then to, let's talk more about what's going on in your life, like how can we support, and then relate that to environmental justice. And so I don't do the canvassing in the day-to-day now, but I'll host things like, we'll do a community dinner, come for free, just have a meal with us. Let's talk about what you're worried about in the community and how we can connect you with different organizations or government resources, or if there's any funding opportunities. And then again, not everyone in the community can do that every day. So there's also ways that I connect with community-based organizations that have their own membership, and they're producing those town halls or getting their input from the community in different ways. And then my job is to then, how do we strategize so that we can tell this to our government entities so that they don't have to come back and ask the same questions over again? How do we reaffirm what we've been hearing from folks? And then if things have changed, then how do we prepare our cities or our government entities, CBOs, to be able to change with our community as they're trying to figure out their place in this environmental justice arena?
I'm wondering, I want you to also, is that a fair question for somebody to ask you about your commitment to your work in that way? Is that fair?
There's accountability, right? Someone needs to hold me accountable so that I know that I'm doing what's right too. And I think that that's really fair for folks to ask, because, I'm not reaching out everybody, But if I connect with Ashleigh, like, hey, Ashleigh, how are you reaching out to folks? Let's figure out a way so that we're not doing the same work over and over. We're figuring out different ways to connect with people and to be able to get that message so that folks are more engaged with us too.
So I don't do what I do every day, 5 days a week.
I agree. I think that different communities have to be home to different levels of accountability. Like something that we've got as a Black-led organization is that often we're resourcing our own communities, but it's just like, well, where do we hold other historically white-led outdoor recreation, environmental education organizations accountable to also resource these communities? And our work specifically centers rest, right? So we're structured in a way that honors not only the wellness of our communities, but the wellness of our teams. So 5 days a week, I personally don't do anything 5 days a week. Just gonna put that out there because I don't think that that would ultimately make me be beneficial to my community at all.
Andrea?
Yeah, I think it's an important question because it is about accountability. And as a government with public resources, we need to be holding ourselves accountable and making sure that we are hearing from as many folks in our community as we can. I think there's so many different ways that people do like to be heard from, but being out in the community on a regular basis is really key. And so there's things that we do, like having a mobile engagement team that's out in the parks, talking to people all the time. We have a team of people out there doing that on a regular basis. And, you know, it doesn't have to be a fill out this survey and this thing again. Have a conversation. What's important to you? What are you noticing? What do you need out here? You know, we have also been working a lot with community-based organizations to try and have more mutually beneficial, supportive relationships. And doing things like this with Rainier Avenue Radio is awesome because we get to help support programming, but then we also get to reach folks that maybe we wouldn't have been able to talk to on a regular day. I think government can feel very disconnected and impersonal to people. So even just being able to put a face on someone who works there and that they are part of the community too and want to hear from you, and that work is never done. Like, I don't want to fatigue anyone by asking them the same question over and over again either. But we want to always try our best to listen and to hear from more and more people and to build off of what we've been hearing over the years and showing people, this is what we were hearing from you. Is this right? Where are your priorities that we should be focusing on? And so that's kind of the way we're framing the feedback for this upcoming levy too. Is this is over many years we've been hearing from folks that these things in parks and outdoor spaces are important to you. Is that right? What are we missing? If limited resources are there, what are the most important things to you and what does that look like? So continuing that conversation, being humble, trying to continue to learn and connect with people.
Yeah.
So in our work over the years, what we really proactively work on is creating opportunity for our various peoples. We've focused a lot on our tribal artists in terms of referrals to have and paid. You know, we're always looking at how do we get you there? How do you increase your life? We've gotten technology grants from the city of Seattle, provided computer equipment to them and others. So that's just one example. The other really most successful couple of ones, we've held a powwow out at Native Park, Victor Steinbrook by Pike Place Market. So we proactively set it up to where everyone is included and build the understanding of tribal peoples, but also all the Native homeless that hang out there. We provide lunches for them. We take care of them in that particular instance. When we have done the Torchlight Parade unit, we saw homeless tribal people crying on the side that they had never seen in their years here being represented, they being represented tribally. There's such a lack of presence, and there's a huge lack of presence around here. It's very underserved. So our elders who agreed to do a panel here on Thursday were like excited about this. And they're the first peoples of the lands here. They're the Duwamish. And then the example of the Urban Forestry Symposium at the University of Washington. I attended. I said, there's no tribal voice here. It's Sierra Club, it's Audubon Society, not to take away from their work, right? But they're Euro white led, and there are a lot of money, and most people that work in those have a lot. I was invited to a Sierra Club meeting over in Redmond. I sat there and I thought, And a young man came up to me after and said, are you coming back? I said, no, you're not going to change. I just can't put my energy this way. So what we've done with the Urban Forestry Symposium, 2021, when it was online, we started introducing whoever chose to watch it and be part of it, introductions to what it means to be tribal. What does it mean to welcome people? What does it mean to walk in a tribal way in connection to the earth, the world, the community, everything? Then the next program, and we're always like more access, online Zoom, and then I write grants and I get grant money to fund these things. Anyone tribal attends the symposium at the University of Washington for free, okay? And it's now 98 to 99% tribally programmed, tribal food, tribal protocols that are embedded in the day so that people begin to learn those things, learn to walk the language, speak the language, and have understanding so that they give the respect. They know and have some sense of who they can relate with and develop relationships, because we're all here together. We're not separate. And that's been about 200 years now. And one of the teachings for me personally years ago was a Middle Eastern organizational leader who disrespected us. We had organized a tribal person, a coastal person to open it, and she put an African group in first against what we had worked together on. Do you want to know how long it took me to heal that relationship? And that just, let's do this. So there's continual work that comes in different formatting. So if you go to Seattle Center now, you'll see more tribal people over there enjoying what it offers. But you'll also see more tribal people. I programmed the Festal Festival one year. I set up that template. They copy it and use it now. We set up at Folklife, every single tribal thing programmed there, we founded. We aren't there anymore. So it's like the lone wolf who scouts the new hunting territories, the resourcing, and where a pack can be formed new, and then it's bringing that back to the former pack so that they are enhanced and are benefited, that they can go out and they can be successful. So it's another example is a year ago, I was asked to join with the digital technology department, City of Seattle, to help with a survey. Their goal was 100 surveys. I went out and got them 150 surveys alone, okay? So that more tribal people would have access to resourcing, to get computers, to have digital, internet service, to be able then to function more, better in this world of technology now, because it's harder and harder to walk in this world. You have to have a cell phone with so much whatever. You have to have a computer. You have to have all this. Well, if there isn't someone who's willing to come in and say, we have these points, and it's still difficult. There's a lot of monetary resourcing, and I'll give King County. This isn't going to be positive, okay? King County invited me to be on their food equity committee to review the application. And then our elder, I invited him in, and he got pulled into that one and the community grant they offer. So the premise with that food one is everyone's a farmer. And farming is the big thing, and you give people to farms and farm this and farm that. We tribal people were never farmers. We were gatherers, we hunted, we fished, and so forth. We were forced, and you can go in and look at the Point Elliott Treaty with Isaac Stevens, and look at what he included in there. Well, we need to make them all farmers. We need to steal their land and all their resources. And they have to be farmers. So you're hearing some of the whatever coming out, but it's like it's constant, whichever direction you go. And I'm a bridge. I have really white skin, okay? I do have Celtic background, but I have tribal. And when I walk into spaces where I'm the only representative in the space, I get up. I get up, and I've been acknowledging the peoples here for years. Not only me, there's others. I'm not taking credit. But it's like, if it's not said, if it's not brought out, if it's not reminded, if it's not bridged so that people who have understanding, they're the seeds that have enough respect in their hearts to go out there and connect with their organizations, along that white system that's perversely insidious. Okay, I know what the colonial framework is: annihilate or make invisible. In your case, with the African American context, it's your chattel property. We need you on a plantation to grow the sugar and to grow the whatever. So you'll survive. You're fine. But tribal people, get rid of them. We've stolen all that. So there's so many layers and levels to then what that work entails. It flows in and out. Sometimes it is knocking on doors. Sometimes, or it's like taking the surveys to groups and getting those and bringing it back to bring it to the government offices. It's educating the government, educating people like her and others. Like, oh, I'm based in Seattle. Okay, I'm writing grants for people. Needs to be in King County. So the event is scheduled in Seattle, but all the tribal people come and travel there. That's a tribal practice that's gone on for thousands of years. They meet where the tribal gathering is. But that doesn't mean, that, well, what it means is I've had to educate these grant offices to say, it's located here, but people are coming from Auburn, Muckleshoot. They're coming from wherever else. And you got to keep working that. We've got to keep working that. Not everyone can do it. I write grants for the artists so they have opportunities and build their lives where they're putting out their culture and invite them into non-native festivals and events and be speakers and presenters and that sort of thing. Been doing it since the first grant that I did in 2006. So it's advocacy, relationship. And the formatting, the methodologies shift with time. So thank you for the question. Thank you for listening to me, everyone, because these are key to be able to do the work and key to be able, okay, we really need to be developing relationships regardless of skin color. Right. That's a colonial construct. I lived in Kenya for a year. I wasn't seen as white. I was seen as, I'm an American. There were blacks in the group. They were seen as American because the context of the colonial setup there is a little different. It's tribal. So when you begin to look at how are we competent culturally? How are we respectful? How do we connect? How do we tap into heart to heart? How do we then take that? And how do we then move to take action and bring solutions on all these levels together, collectively together, action? So the whole point, and our elders are very much that, you got to take action steps and not just talk about it. Talk. That happens all too often, too much. So what do you do after we step out of here? How do we go back? How do we connect more with Tony? How do we connect more with you? How do we pull and bring these things together? How do we invite you over to our things so that then you're honored and respected? And you probably have tribal blood in you. Choctaw, Chickasaw, Seminole, or Creek. You probably do. Okay. Or something else somewhere. So that's this world. It's this world. And it takes time too. I'm seeing more tribal people and more tribal things happening in Seattle since I moved here in 2001. And that's a good thing. But we got to keep doing it because we still, another example, I was working security at Climate Pledge and I heard, oh, there's a mural here somewhere. Oh, it's down in a staircase that people exit out of that don't see. They don't even see when I would say, follow the Muckleshoot canoes up the stairs out the door. No, you're being carried that way. Oh, I think there was maybe 1 or 2 people out of hundreds, not that many, but who left and like, oh, wow, oh, there's a mural here. Oh, that's beautiful. Why was it placed there? Why was it placed there where people don't walk, who go to all those Kraken games and concerts and all that? Why isn't it out in the middle of the center atrium of that building? Right. Right. I mean, those are the kinds of things we continually are looking at. And we have a blessing with the Association for Downtown Seattle to do 4 murals in downtown Seattle. So when they bring those locations to us, I'm going to say, okay, how much traffic comes around here? Where can you place this where everyone will see it? Because tourists ask, oh, this is a tribal area. Where's the tribal stuff? You still don't see it. Not really. You don't really see the people. You don't really see where it's located. We have to keep doing that. And we have to keep bringing it. And we have to keep working amongst all of the intertribally. It's not just one tribe. It's over 300 and some, plus all the reservation, recognized and the unrecognized. And that's a colonial construct. It's something that you really need to understand. The framing that went with the treaties. Yeah. What's a confederated reservation? It means the whites came and said, well, with Muckleshoot, we can't speak Lushootseed, so we'll put these different clan, family, village groups together. You're now called Muckleshoot. Stillaguamish has 5 groups. Yakima is confederated. Colville's confederated. Tulalip is confederated. And then the ones that are the peoples they are, like Puyallup and others. And then the coast, they're more removed. So the Macaws are Macaw and Quileutes tend to be Quileute. Quinault is confederated. So those are the kinds of things that we teach, educate, inform, so that then when you walk and you look to where you are, you have a greater sense of who are the first peoples and then how do we relate with that? And how do we understand it so that we know the history that we could then take and move present into the future? There's more that can be said. So thank you again.
We'll continue to amplify the diverse voices of our community. That's what we do. Thank you guys for staying a little extra. We do have another question that I do want to get in because that's what we do.
Thank you. First of all, I appreciate you telling us the story of the people and relating it to ours. But now, and understanding that your people understand Earth. When it comes to our people, we lost our land. We lost what we were taught. But this question goes to the Park District because you are on another level where you understand the land. And I'm asking the Park District person, is there the people who play football, for example, are looking at the fees that are continuously going up. Consequently, what you see in the neighborhood, people or kids are playing soccer who are a different color. So consequently, those blacks who would use that area of the parks to become more acquainted with it are losing out. So the question for you is it true that the fees are going up and the black kids who who are involved with athletics are having a harder time getting to play on those fields?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think that in general, there are fees that are going up. As a King County person, I can't speak for every individual city parks situation because they set their own fee structure. But we have heard many times over that the need for people to have outdoor recreation and to be able to do organized sports like that is critically important. And so one of the things that we're working on right now is trying to pass some ordinances that would allow us to have free and reduced athletic fee coverage so that people could not have as much of an impact financially. But in addition, I think more and more, we need to also make sure that our sports fields and other places are multi-use. So that same piece of land that may be harder to come by now, unfortunately, has the ability to be converted into multiple different types of sports so that all sorts of different communities can go to that same spot and use it and try and balance it in as equitable way as we can. So with a lot of our athletic fields, if it was only lined for soccer before, we're doing things like lacrosse, if we can, cricket. So many people would love to have cricket across the county, for example. Youth sports, as well as adult sports, trying to do as much as we can to hear from people what they need and then utilize those resources as many times over as we can, so as many different types of interests and folks can come in and use it as possible. Does that answer your question?
Pretty much, except one thing. Do you happen to keep statistics on the number of Black kids who attend the parks? I totally understand that you have to have multiple reasons for using a park. But if in fact the people that you say that we're trying, going back to what he's saying, that you're trying to support actually can't use it because of these things, and the city has brought these changes so that these kids can't do it, what is your expectations if you don't have statistics? What are your expectations? And will you get statistics so you will have an argument?
Yeah, that's a great point. I think that we do not have enough information for sure. And that a big part of figuring it out is where are we now? And we need to hear from people like yourself and others about these being issues. We work a lot with Play Equity Coalition and some other folks that are a part of sports recreation for communities of color. And we hear from them a lot, but we need to hear from as many people as possible and start to be able to understand where are we right now. Let's get as much information gathered as we can moving forward. And also hearing from people, one of the barriers is price. Well, what can we do to address that? Another barrier may be there isn't a place that you can play football within 10 miles of where you live. Maybe you're like, what are the different things that are a factor there? And then which communities are being affected by that? How can we mitigate that? How can we keep in conversation so that that doesn't become a long-term further impact and harm to someone? And so I appreciate you sharing that. We have a long way to go. And we're also trying to work as much as we can with community organizations and folks who are committed to that type of work and are a part of that community too, because they, unfortunately, we don't know every single thing that every community needs, but we can work with as many people as possible and try and have an open dialogue in order to help address that better. We really can't do it on our own, and we need to do our part to make sure that we're listening and that we are gathering that information. So thank you.
9:30 tomorrow morning. Nancy will be back discussing resiliency hubs. The Thursday that Kim was talking about, local eco-cultural systems, barriers, and access. That's Thursday at noon. And another King County panel discussion will be taking place 4 to 5 on Thursday. Executive Climate Equity Team, Green Jobs, Climate Equity, Task Force, and Climate Preparedness effort at King County. It's a lot. We went over time a little bit, but again, letting voices be heard is what we do. That's how we get down. Thank you so much to our panel for joining us and trying to tackle this big question, what is environmental justice? We'll be back very shortly with our panel from the Black Farmers Collectives as we continue our entire week-long 5 days of Earth Deserves More Than a Day. It's me, Tony B. We'll be back shortly. Thank you for joining us. Thanks to our panel.
Thank you.